Y es que si hablamos de inversión de impacto social, es como ya lo tratamos de trasladar, de hecho, el primer día en nuestra sesión plenaria, donde hubo una mesa específica sobre el sector social, como digo, es fundamental contar con el sector social y el sector de fundaciones, ¿no? Y es que algunas ideas con las que yo me he quedado, o sea, esto está emergiendo con mucha fuerza, empezando por España, casos como el fondo de fundaciones que se mencionaba, que desde el Spain Up pensamos que es un ejemplo muy interesante y de hecho vamos a estar documentándolo y trataremos de darle máxima visibilidad en los próximos meses porque, como digo, pensamos que puede ser un buen ejemplo a seguir para otras fundaciones. Europa también. Europa está poniendo una importancia importante en el sector social para esta recuperación, ¿no? Se están estableciendo si se van a canalizar también instrumentos financieros para las fundaciones como las garantías de InvestEU que se comentaba, ¿no? E incluso a nivel internacional también se está moviendo una entidad multilateral con la que ya contamos, de hecho, el día de la sesión plenaria, la OCDE, está apostando realmente por elevar el sector social y de la economía social a la agenda internacional. Y de hecho, desde el Spain NAP formamos parte de un consorcio con otros NAPs europeos y mundiales para tratar de profundizar en estándares sobre medición y gestión del impacto para entidades de la economía social, en la cual también, entre otras, están las fundaciones. Por lo tanto, muy relevante este debate en torno al sector social y cómo conectarlo con ese ecosistema de impacto y de inversión de impacto. Y precisamente al hilo de ese movimiento internacional, ya pasamos a nuestro siguiente bloque, que va sobre el rol de las instituciones públicas de desarrollo en la inversión de impacto, ¿no? Una vez más, gracias a todos nuestros patrocinadores. Y este es un tema que conviene resaltar porque si bien es verdad que cuando arrancamos este proceso, una vez que España se adhirió al GSG, la inversión de impacto en el ámbito del desarrollo no era una de nuestras prioridades, hemos de admitir, estábamos mucho más enfocados en cómo movilizar capital en España para invertirlo en España. Sin embargo, lo que hemos visto es que también hay una tendencia muy importante y Europa está apostando con muchísima fuerza en también incluir la visión de la inversión de impacto en la cooperación al desarrollo clásica. Y por eso hoy tenemos una sesión muy interesante de altísimo nivel sobre este tema, que además le estamos enmarcando, como digo, en esta nueva apuesta del Spain Up por este segmento del desarrollo, con un nuevo task force que vamos a lanzar, un nuevo grupo de trabajo de la mano de nuestros aliados de DT Global. Y bueno, para moderar este panel y para conducir un poco esta sesión, tenemos con nosotros a Luca Torre. Luca Torre es co-CEO, cofundador, adelante Luca, de Gawa Capital, que es yo creo que una de las firmas pioneras en la inversión de impacto, tanto en España como a nivel europeo e internacional. Así que, Luca, muchísimas gracias y adelante.
Gracias a vosotros por la invitación y realmente para empezar a profundizar el tema de inversión de impacto para el desarrollo, para el exterior, que es realmente donde hace muchos años yo creo la inversión de impacto realmente nació. La nueva Task Force tiene como objetivo estudiar e impulsar el importante rol del capital privado, así como de las instituciones públicas en el fomentar la inversión de impacto. Y en el día de hoy vamos a enfocarnos en el tema de las inversiones, de las instituciones públicas, que siempre, como comentaba, han sido realmente pioneras en la inversión de impacto. Han invertido en países de desarrollo con el objetivo de aliviar la pobreza desde hace realmente muchísimas décadas. Cuando todavía el término de la inversión de impacto todavía no existía. Y quiero recordar también que la cooperación española llegó a ser el inversor en microfinanzas más grande en el mundo, gestionando una cartera de más de 600 millones. Entonces, pensamos a esto a lo largo realmente de la sesión. Dicho esto, quiero empezar, tenemos el lujo de realmente poder empezar esta sesión con la intervención de María Garrón, reconocidísima líder en el sector del desarrollo internacional, que nos vas a presentar los resultados preliminares de un estudio que DT Global, que como ha mencionado José Luis, va a ser el patrocinador de esta nueva Task Force. Un nuevo estudio que está preparando sobre el rol del sistema español de cooperación internacional como dinamizador de la inversión de impacto desde España hacia países en vía de desarrollo. María es la directora general de DT Global Europe, un importante proveedor global de asistencia técnica en temas de desarrollo internacional. María, bienvenida. The floor is yours.
Muchísimas gracias, Luca. Desde luego, con esta presentación ya no sé qué decir. Pues muchísimas gracias. La verdad es que estamos muy contentos de participar hoy y de presentaros esta Task Force que creemos que es fundamental para explicar cuál va a ser o cuál podría ser el papel de todos los agentes de la ayuda y del trabajo de la cooperación, de todos los agentes españoles de cooperación internacional como dinamizadores de la inversión de impacto desde España hacia los países en vías de desarrollo. La idea de nuestro trabajo es ver qué recomendaciones y qué buenas prácticas se pueden incorporar en el sistema español de cooperación internacional. Como decía Luca hace un momento, vamos a presentaros hoy las hipótesis y los datos preliminares que hemos podido sacar, las conclusiones muy básicas que hemos identificado en este estudio, analizando datos de Alemania, de Francia y de Países Bajos y de los datos que tenemos de España actualmente y haciendo una comparativa del sector público y del sector privado en la inversión de impacto desde los países hacia los países en vías de desarrollo. Antes de arrancar con la presentación, he de decir, a modo de disclaimer, que es muy difícil y es muy complicado analizar los datos actualmente, por una cosa que se ha ido comentando a lo largo de estos días, y es que no hay un criterio homogéneo a la hora de identificar qué es inversión de impacto, qué estamos midiendo, cómo analizamos, porque no existe pues, ni criterios claros de qué estamos midiendo, cómo vamos a analizarlo, y eso sí que es bueno, pues un ejercicio creo que muy importante y algo que nos hemos puesto creo que todos como propósito, ¿no? Y algo que ahora mismo todos los NAPs en todos los países en Europa estamos considerando algo necesario y muy importante, el homogeneizar los criterios para poder construir y poder trabajar todos juntos hacia unos criterios homogéneos y poder medir claramente los resultados. Entonces, sin más, yo creo que empezaría a haceros la presentación de dónde estamos. Una cosa fundamental es cuál es el papel del sector público, ¿no? Y yo creo que en esto sí que tenemos todos clarísimo que el papel del sector público es fundamental para crear un ecosistema que facilite la inversión de impacto. Políticas que faciliten esa inversión sostenible de OSG, aunque no sea específicamente de inversión de impacto, van a ser fundamentales para abrir el camino a las inversiones. El sector público es fundamental, pero si esto además añadimos el papel que juegan las instituciones financieras de desarrollo, añadimos ya una tercera dimensión, porque van a ofrecer un capital catalizador que van a abrir inversiones en mercados que tradicionalmente el sector privado tiene un papel muy, muy pequeño. Van a utilizar pues, sus conocimientos de las instituciones públicas, van a utilizar además, como decía, pues, su capacidad de asistencia técnica, van a poder utilizar además relaciones consolidadas en mercados tradicionalmente muy marginados y van a adoptar pues, estándares medioambientales y sociales para las inversiones y van a tener un rol tradicional pues, para impulsar colaboraciones entre inversiones privadas y públicas y hacer unas inversiones a gran escala. Si analizamos los datos que vemos en la presentación, vemos que en España el papel del sector público es bastante más pequeño que lo que serían actualmente las inversiones que genera el sector privado, un 30 frente a un 70%, frente a lo que ocurre con nuestros vecinos de Alemania, Francia o Países Bajos, en los que el papel del sector privado es un 75% en el caso de Alemania, Francia de un 60% o de Países Bajos de un 30%. He de puntualizar de nuevo que en el caso de Países Bajos, aunque 30 frente a un 70% nos parezca que el papel del sector público en Países Bajos sea muy pequeño, en realidad es muy grande. Lo que ocurre es que el papel del sector privado en Países Bajos es tan elevado que parece o reduce gráficamente el papel del sector público en los Países Bajos, pero en realidad es simplemente en las gráficas que aparece muy pequeño, pero es un papel muy, muy elevado también en el caso de Holanda. El papel del sector público sigue siendo muy grande. Así que en general vemos como en todos nuestros países el papel del sector público va a ser fundamental para la atracción de la inversión de impacto. Siguiente slide, por favor. A ver si me pasan al siguiente. Aquí. Aquí lo que vamos a analizar es cuál es la relevancia de esa claridad en el mandato de las instituciones de desarrollo como explicación de los números. En la primera parte lo que analizamos en la primera línea horizontal es cómo es la forma de la entidad legal. En el caso de COFIDES es una entidad estatal. En el caso de KfW, no sé si se puede ver bien, es un banco. En el caso de Proparco, de nuevo, sigue siendo otra entidad también bancaria y lo mismo ocurre con el FMO en Países Bajos. En el caso de tener además una licencia bancaria, tanto en el caso de Alemania como Francia y Países Bajos tienen una licencia bancaria y en el caso de COFIDES no la tiene. Esto va a suponer un cierto problema para nosotros, ya que va a tener menos flexibilidad, por ejemplo, en el hecho de operar con una moneda local en el país. Es una desventaja ya que, por ejemplo, el tipo de cambio recaería en el prestatario al no poder operar con la moneda local. ¿Cuál es la estructura y el mandato que van a tener cada una de las diferentes instituciones? COFIDES apoya a la Agencia Española de Cooperación Internacional en la gestión del fondo para la promoción del desarrollo, para FONPRODE, bajo el Ministerio de Asuntos Exteriores. KfW es el brazo financiero de la cooperación al desarrollo alemana, ambos bajo la supervisión del Ministerio Federal de Cooperación Económica y Desarrollo, y dentro de esa acción internacional están creados para apoyar a empresas privadas interviniendo en países en vías de desarrollo, es decir, tienen un mandato claro de apoyo al sector privado. En el caso de Proparco, en el caso de Francia, el mandato es invertir y apoyar a empresas, a proyectos e instituciones financieras del sector privado para contribuir al desarrollo de los países en vías de desarrollo. Y en el caso del FMO en Países Bajos, el mandato claro es promover el desarrollo del sector privado en países en vías de desarrollo. Es decir, vemos como de nuevo el mandato claro, tanto en Alemania, Francia y Países Bajos, es promover el desarrollo del sector privado. En el de COFIDES es el apoyo a la agencia para la gestión del fondo, quedando un poco diluido si va a ser un apoyo al sector privado o a otros agentes y no estando tan claro este mandato que a lo mejor ha quedado un poco diluido y no queda del todo recogido. ¿Cuál es el portfolio de los cuatro? En el caso de COFIDES, tiene un portfolio de 1,7 millones de euros con 284 millones. De nuevo voy a hacer una puntualización. Los datos que hemos utilizado para trabajar la presentación y para hacer todo el estudio son los datos que encontramos actualmente o que para poder trabajarlo y poder trabajar son los datos que aparecen en el estudio del EDFI, que vamos a tener la suerte de contar en la siguiente presentación con el presidente, con Bruno Wen. Son los datos que hemos podido utilizar para comparar los cuatro países, pero que de nuevo recogen un poco lo que se ha asimilado como inversión de impacto. En el caso de COFIDES, estos datos de 1,7 millones no es únicamente inversión de impacto, sino que recoge todas las actividades de COFIDES. Si nos limitamos a lo que es únicamente inversión de impacto, que serían los fondos que estarían dentro de FONPRODE, serían los 361 millones, a datos del 2018. ¿De acuerdo? Si vamos al caso de KfW, según los datos de DFI, serían 8,7 millones de euros con 732 proyectos. ¿Vale? Esto lo hemos verificado y sería 100% inversión de impacto, conforme a los datos del NAV de Alemania. En el caso de Proparco, los datos que aparecían en el estudio para hacer la comparativa serían 7,2 millones de euros con 1.108 proyectos, pero una vez que hemos estado verificando todos los datos y hablando con el NAP de Francia y demás, corresponderían únicamente a operaciones 100% de inversión de impacto a 5,5 millones. No serían los 7,2 porque eso incluye otra serie de operaciones. Y en el caso de Países Bajos son 10,4 millones con 1.042 proyectos y aquí sí que corresponde al 100% a operaciones de inversión de impacto puras. Como vemos, de nuevo, hay muchísimas operaciones de inversión de impacto en comparación a la cantidad tan pequeñita, porque creo, bueno, pues estamos arrancando y nuestro sector público ahora mismo tiene que empezar a movilizar y está, bueno, pues empezando ahora mismo. En la parte del crecimiento para el 2018-2019 hemos tenido un crecimiento de un 12,4% en el caso de España, un 20% en Alemania, un 22% en Francia y un 18% en Holanda. Y el flujo de inversiones para el 2019 ha sido de 218 millones en Cofides, lo que sería Fonprode específicamente el 2018 serían 7 millones, 1,7 para millones de euros con 99 proyectos en Alemania, 1,5 millones en Proparco y 1,8 con 170 en Holanda. Siguiente slide, por favor. El tipo de instrumentos con los que contamos. En el caso de Cofides, en capital y casi capital tiene un 39%, deuda un 61% y no tiene capacidad para garantías. En el caso de Alemania, capital y cuasi capital un 45%, deuda 55% y sin garantías. Proparco, capital y cuasi capital 25%, deuda 72% y garantías un 2%. Y FMO, capital y cuasi capital 56%, deuda 40% y garantías un 4%. De nuevo, matices importantes que hacer. En el caso de KfW sí que tiene capacidad para emitir garantías, pero desde hace 2 o 3 años no las está utilizando, seguramente debido a que no las ha necesitado, no ha habido demanda en el mercado. Y en el caso de Cofides, lamentablemente, por un tema de normativa, no tiene permiso para utilizar, bueno, al no tener además la licencia bancaria, no puede emitir garantías y no tiene capacidad para usarlas, frente al resto de los otros 3, que al ser entidades bancarias sí que tienen. Fondo de asistencia técnica. En el caso de Cofides no tiene un fondo de asistencia técnica asociado. KfW, Proparco y FMO sí que tienen. El hecho de no tener el fondo de asistencia técnica, aunque la ley incluye la posibilidad de hacer cooperación o reembolsable, bueno, pues la asistencia técnica como complemento de la inversión de impacto pues puede garantizar, ¿no?, la sostenibilidad de un proyecto que siempre pensamos, y por nuestra experiencia con otros, que es importante y contribuye a la sostenibilidad de esa inversión. Los sectores de actuación hemos incluido los 3 más importantes porque hay un gran portfolio de sectores, está muy diversificado, pero serían fundamentalmente el sector financiero, la industria de manufactura y la infraestructura para el caso de Cofides. Se vuelve a repetir el financiero, la industria y la infraestructura en el caso de KfW. Infraestructura, financiero y agroindustria en el caso de Proparco, aumentando cada vez más en la agroindustria en el caso de Proparco, siendo cada vez más relevante este. Y en el caso de Países Bajos, sector financiero, infraestructura y la manufactura y la industria también. Las regiones de actuación en el caso de Cofides están América Latina y el Caribe con un 38% y África subsahariana con un 8%. En el caso de KfW Alemania tenemos América Latina y el Caribe con un 30% y África subsahariana con un 21%. Proparco, África subsahariana un 33% y América Latina y el Caribe con un 18%. Y en el caso de Países Bajos, África subsahariana un 36% y América Latina y el Caribe con un 26%. Es verdad, y aquí como otra conclusión de estos datos, pues que destaca la poca presencia de España en África subsahariana. Después de América Latina, que es la región en la que más está invirtiendo España, había una diversificación de regiones, otros países, multicountry, y bueno, el siguiente sería África subsahariana, que nos parece, bueno, que un 8% es bajito para toda la importancia que tiene actualmente para España el territorio. Y es un dato relevante que dejo aquí para luego el debate que va a liderar Luca, que yo creo que son... Luca, te dejo aquí las notas y luego tú ya coges el guante para el debate. Y en el siguiente slide, lo que vemos cuál es el papel en el sector privado, la heterogeneidad de actores liderando en el mercado por país. Vemos que en el caso de España, el total de activos bajo gestión de gestoras de capital privado es de 536 millones, Podéis ver en el gráfico que un 64 fundamentalmente son los bancos, los que tienen el mayor trozo de la inversión está en mano de los bancos. Luego tenemos gestores de capital, fundaciones y otros. En el caso de Alemania es casi todo, pertenece a fundaciones y family offices, bancos, gestores de capital y otros con otro trocito más pequeño. En el caso de Francia, casi todos suelen ser fondos de impacto, bancos, compañías inmobiliarias y otros, y en el caso de los Países Bajos, fondos y gestoras de pensiones y aseguradoras. Es, de nuevo, otro sistema bastante diferente, es decir, que en el caso de España, pues si hablamos bancos con el 64% y los 536 millones, las cifras de Alemania es que son muchísimo más grandes. Solo con, por ejemplo, Finance in Motion, que hemos puesto la cifra, es 1,7 billones de euros. Inversión tenemos 770 millones y Banking Booster, que tiene 245 millones. En el caso de Francia, que son los activos bajo gestión de Impact Partners, que son 340 millones, o los Investisseurs de Partenaires, que son 210 millones, y los Países Bajos con Triodos, que tiene 5,4 billones de euros, o Triple Jump, que tiene 907 millones. O sea, de nuevo, las cantidades siguen siendo muchísimo más grandes frente a las nuestras en el sector privado, pero aún así el movimiento que se genera dentro del sector privado es más grande que el que generamos dentro del sector público. Si hablamos de gestores de capital, pues en el caso de España tendríamos a Gagua Capital o Fondo Bolso Social, CREAS, Meridia, o sea, creo que ya conocemos un poco todos. En Alemania, Finance in Motion, como está ahí mencionado, Investitions Bank. En Francia, Impact Partners, que lo tenéis mencionado, Investisseurs. Y en Holanda, Triodos y Triple Jump, Corkite, Actions. Pero es verdad que en los otros países existen además otras figuras, ¿no? Que son pues, relevantes y que tienen otra manera de actuar. En España el mayor rol lo tienen los bancos, en Alemania suelen ser sobre todo fundaciones y family offices, como decía, pero en Francia, por ejemplo, son los fondos de impacto que agrupan, ¿no?, inversores de impacto como gestores de fondos o sociedades de inversión con un modelo específico, que es otra manera de hacer inversión de impacto. O bancos y compañías inmobiliarias que son muy populares en Francia como proyectos de vivienda social. También tienen inversores institucionales, empresas aseguradoras. Y las fundaciones, en cambio, que aquí en España son muy populares en la inversión de impacto, en Francia tienen un peso muy relevante, pero utilizan otras herramientas diferentes, más tradicionales. En Países Bajos, en cambio, pues utilizan pues inversión más institucional, por ejemplo. ¿Vale? Así que, bueno, hay bastante heterogeneidad de datos, hay mucho que trabajar y nuestra idea es ir avanzando. Hemos visto que hay otros NAPs que quieren ayudarnos en esta tarea y el homogeneizar también su toma de datos para poder hacer un estudio comparativo de cómo mejorar la toma de datos y cómo poder ayudar en la toma de las decisiones, de cómo podríamos hacer mejor la toma de datos en Europa y así ayudar en la salida fuera. Y nuestra intención es presentar este estudio comparativo de los 4 países en nuestra siguiente reunión en abril. Con lo cual esperamos poder presentaros ya mucho más consolidado todos los datos y un informe que de verdad sirva para dar el paso y el impulso que necesita pues nuestra cooperación y nuestra salida de inversión de impacto a los países en vías de desarrollo. Gracias.
Muchísimas gracias, María. Cuántos datos interesantes. Eso van a ser muy útil para el panel realmente para el panel que viene. I'm going to switch to English because our panel is going to be in English. So I think for me, one key message of your presentation, what the data show is that there is a lot of potential, both from the public side and also on the private side, if we compare ourselves to other countries. So now, bueno, vuelvo un segundo a español y después volvemos otra vez al inglés. Bueno, ahora necesitamos vuestro input de la audiencia y vamos a lanzar como siempre unas cuantas, dos preguntas, dos park-up questions para que podáis vosotros también dar vuestra opinión y podamos usar el input que nos vais a dar para la mesa que viene. Entonces, la primera pregunta es, ¿el papel de instituciones públicas de desarrollo en inversión de impacto debe ser donar a ONG, dedicadas a cooperación, que es lo que tradicionalmente la cooperación internacional ha hecho. Invertir en fondos de inversión de impacto dedicados al desarrollo o invertir en empresas sociales. O sea, directamente invertir, no a través de los fondos, pero directamente en empresas. Os invito a votar. Parece que todos estamos absolutamente, bueno, eso. Me parece que estamos, aquí hay un mensaje clarísimo, o sea, que la audiencia cree que las inversiones de cooperación al desarrollo tendrían que enfocarse, utilizar realmente fondos de inversión de impacto dedicados al desarrollo para invertir en desarrollo. Bueno, entonces con eso nos dejamos. Eso es el mensaje, yo creo que se ha quedado clarísimo. Podemos pasar a la segunda pregunta. ¿Qué instrumento deben utilizar las instituciones de desarrollo para generar un mayor impacto? Uno es el capital catalítico y eso claramente se ha hablado mucho durante estos días. O sea, el segundo es asistencia técnica, que no nos olvidamos, es algo extremadamente importante para maximizar el impacto. O como tradicionalmente han hecho las instituciones financieras de desarrollo, invertir en activos reales, infraestructura, por ejemplo, en esquemas, por ejemplo, de private-public partnerships, etc. Y muchas instituciones de desarrollo han jugado un papel fundamental en países de desarrollo, construir la infraestructura necesaria, rutas, etcétera, etcétera. Bueno, parece que aquí también la audiencia está bastante polarizada, yo diría, en el capital catalítico. Y debo decir la verdad que yo personalmente estoy bastante de acuerdo, aún yo creo que los tres, era un poco una pregunta trampa en ese sentido, porque yo creo que los tres tienen un rol realmente fundamental en el desarrollo. Muy bien. Entonces, now let's switch to English for real. And we do have a really, I'm really humbled. We do have a stellar panel to further explore the role that development financial institutions are playing to improve the lives of billions of people with the collaboration of private sector. So we have Fernando Jiménez Ontivero, Director for Multilateral, Horizontal and Financial Cooperation at AECID. Fernando, welcome. We have José Luis Curbelo, President of COFIDES. José Luis, welcome. And then we have Bruno Venn, the chairman of EDFI, the European Development Finance Institutions, which Maria just, where the data came from, really, from Maria's presentation. And Bruno also was the former chairman of DG in Germany. Bruno, welcome to the panel as well. Let me provide just a 2 minutes context to the audience, and then we start with questions. So over the past 20 years, really the operating environment of DFIs have substantially changed. And I think it's becoming increasingly complex for policymakers. And there are two trends that I think we're seeing. The first one is that we're really moving, there is a huge need for resources and for money. I would say that we're probably moving from, until 10, 15 years ago, we were talking about billions of dollars or euros were needed, and now we're moving to trillions. The number of studies that said that for achieving the SDGs, we do need 2.5 trillion annually. And now the same, I think it was the ACD who issued a new study. With the pandemic, this 2.5 now moved to 4.2 trillion. If you add the climate change, we really do need a lot of resources. And the second issue is that there's been a lot of pressure on government budgets because of the pandemic, and we're reading it on the newspaper. So key is where are DFI, where is all this money going to be found? And I think DFIs here can play a really important role in catalyzing private capital. If we want to achieve those kind of numbers, the trillions, we need to tap into the 370 trillion global finance market, really. And then the second trend is complexity. The impact investing sector has grown exponentially over the past 10 years, and is really is much more articulated. We're talking about catalytic capital, pretty complex financial structuring, but also extremely powerful. So given that, given this new context, I would start with the first question for Bruno, which is, how is the role of development financial institution at an international level evolving, change, and how has to change?
Thanks, Luca, and I appreciate very much to join the panel. So our 15 European member institutions are by their mandate risk takers, responsible financiers and impact investors. And indeed, our role has increased over the last several years, especially since the SDGs have recognized the crucial role of the private sector for an inclusive, environmental, economic, and social sustainable growth. EDFI members' annual investments is growing rapidly. From 2005 to 2019, investments grew from 2.6 billion euros to 9 billion. And the combined EDFI portfolio grew even further from 10.9 billion in 2005 to 46 billion in 2019. And in recognition of the growing importance of DFIs to promote the private sector and to incentivize and catalyze investments required to transition to sustainable, inclusive, carbon-free growth models, many shareholders of our EDFI member institutions have provided additional risk capital, additional risk guarantees, and have provided funds for technical assistance advisory services to clients. Why is that needed? Because today it's crucial when investing in fragile countries and to help clients to comply with ESG requirements, so environmental and social and governance requirements, and to adapt the business models to align with Paris agreements on climate. And other governments have created DFIs, like Canada has done with FinDev, or have broadened the mandate and the instruments of their DFIs, like the US government has done that. So in a sense, it shows there is a growing recognition by governments and a growing preparedness of governments to helping their DFIs to provide much more funding, which is needed, and at the same time also building a bridge to the many impact investors around. Back to you, Luca.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Bruno. What about the question for you, Fernando? What about Spain? I mean, how is the Spanish cooperation reacting to the current global challenges? We understand that there is a new international cooperation law which is being drafted. How do you think Spain should react to this new context that I just described a minute ago?
Hi, Luca. Thank you so much for the invitation. Can you hear me well?
Yes, very well.
Okay. So you're right. The Spanish cooperation is about to enter a new foundation, really, to adapt to global challenges. The Spanish government in particular has aligned itself with the Addis Ababa and the 2030 agendas, not only as a cornerstone of its international cooperation, but as a comprehensive national political agenda. It is important to acknowledge, as you yourself introduced, that the ecosystem of development has evolved dramatically since 1998. We're talking about the past century. That was the year of the current law. Partnerships is the name of the game, particularly in a country such as Spain, with such a decentralized cooperation system. There's a very proactive presence of the private sector, civil society, universities, NGOs, comunidades autónomas, local governments. So this is really one of the richness, but at the same time a challenge for the Spanish cooperation. On top of this 2030 agenda, if wasn't enough. The disruption of the pandemic has required also a swift response from all international donors, and I think it has not been an exception. And we have been developing, as a ministry, a COVID-19 strategy to focus on a green and inclusive exit of the crisis based on 3 Rs: response, recovery, and resilience. Now, sometimes people ask, okay, so is it realistic to pursue the 2030 agenda in the context of the COVID-19? I think that yes, the pandemic even reinforces the notion that global problems require a coordinated international response. So what do we need? This new foundation requires first a combination of more human and financial resources. That is quantity. You need that through a law, but also through budget. You need really an agency that is endowed with more financial means, frankly, because it has suffered a 70% reduction in its budget in the last 6 years. Second, we need a new financial cooperation law that simplifies processes, incorporates and develop new financial instruments, and I hope I will have an opportunity to elaborate on this. And then for a new structure, which is less dependent on the national budget. That is the direction in which all our neighboring countries in Europe are moving to. Something like a structure like a financial society, in the long term, perhaps a national development bank, clearly a structure that can issue bonds, crowd in private sector financing. So I think we need those two things: a new way of engaging with other partners and to be able to crowd in that capital, as you say, to move from billions to trillions. Also, in the public sector, a more embedded coordination of 3 policies that are intertwined: internationalization of the economy, external debt management, and cooperation for sustainable development. So I'll end up by saying that the final decision on the structure and the new law must very carefully combine this co-governance, this shared governance with the ministries of the economic area, and a balance which is not evident between risk management and protection of the balance sheet of a society without losing the objective of a sustainable impact. What it is important to conclude is that this reform is critical if we want to play in the same league of other national development agencies like AFD, KfW, and CDP, and to be at the forefront of the global Europe efforts. Thank you.
Thank you for being so candid and direct. I think it's that's great. And as you say, we need a good reform, and I think these are very good basis. Jose Luis. So one data that we've seen in Maria's presentation said that the private sector capital in impact investing for development in Spain is substantially smaller than in other countries. And the reason is that I think the ecosystem is very new. I think it's growing very fast. It certainly has a lot of potential, but it's still quite new. So do you think the DFIs do have a role in supporting building this ecosystem? And if so, what do you think? What could COFIDE's role? What could COFIDE's role or FONPRODE's role be? And also, Jose Luis, if you want to add anything on what Fernando said on the reforms, you're very, very welcome as well. I think that's really an interesting topic as well. So you're very welcome to add anything on that as well.
Thank you very much, Luca. It is a great pleasure to be in the same discussion table with Bruno and with Fernando. I think that both of them represent the 2 pillars that we have to have in any reform that we'll do in the future about cooperation and about the role of the private sector in cooperation. I will say that the issue of money very relevant, I think it is not the main problem. Of course, if we want to play in a league, I don't know if we want to play in the big leagues, but if we want to play in a league that is acceptable for the size and the dimension of our country in the international realm, we have to realize that we lack not only money, but also we lack institutionality, as Fernando has been emphasizing, but also we lack a civil society capable of developing a strong policy in developing countries and engaging private sector and philanthropies and actors and the different type of agents that we should have. I will say in that case that my first conclusion is that being important, the role of the DFI is because of the money. It is not the most important thing. I think that for us is important, for DFIs is important setting standards. What is development finance? What is impact finance? How do we measure this? How we avoid impact washing? We have to realize that there is a huge amount of impact washing all around. We have to be able to structure operations that are not easy, that are very complex, with a lot of agents, with the agents that have different tolerance to risk, that have different interests, different scope, and so on. So we have to be able to work on that. We have to create trust among the different agents, and I think that is not easy, especially when you introduce what we call patient investors. You will have to have that the patient investor have a face beyond the mirror that is trustful and in which you can work in the long-term scope of time that you want to work. We have to be able to establish a relationship with a lot of actors, multilaterals, donors, technical assistance providers, philanthropies, understanding the sustainable goals and avoiding as I said, the impact washing and all these things that we have been talking. So I will say that we have to be able to work all these elements that we need to have an ecosystem. And I will say that the DFIs, the collaboration between DFIs and whatever is this institutionalization that we create. Because institutionalization, at least for me, is the second realm out of governance. What are our goals? As we have goals, we can create systems of governance in which we will find an institution that is appropriate for that. So also we have, for instance, one of the problems, and look, as you know, because we have been talking a lot, and later on probably we'll talk about Duruma. One of the big problems here to enlarge the idea of impact financing is that there are not very many actors, managers, people that know the territories and that they know how to structure, that combine the technical abilities with the knowledge of the space, with the ability to put together people with different interests. So we have to be able to build an ecosystem, and of course, COFIDES is an institution that have to play a role. COFIDES have excellent people, also not only from a professional point of view, but also committed to the goal. So, and I think that with people in the Spanish Agency of Cooperation, we have an excellent relationship. We are trying to, because all of us are in the same boat, and I don't know, sometimes we will try to row in the same direction, or more or less in the same direction. We don't have to be exactly in the same direction. We have to be more or less in the same direction, and for sure we will do something that will be much better.
Thank you very much, Jose Luis. I think building an ecosystem is key, and I think there is a lot of potential. I mean, I'm personally receiving lots of calls throughout the years of Spaniards that live in, and you know very well, you know, they live in Washington, D.C., they live in Latin America, they potentially, a lot of talent that would like to come back to Spain. There is just not enough organizations able to really bring them back. So I think there is an opportunity also to bring back a lot of talent from abroad back to Spain if this ecosystem was going to be built. So, and I think, thank you very much. Cofidis is playing a tremendous role, I think, on this. I would move, as you touched upon that already, but I would go a little bit deeper on the point of instruments, right? I think so far we agree that the role of DFIs has changed, but as the role has changed, instruments also do have to change. They do need to adapt to this new reality. A question for Bruno, but also for the rest of the panelists, is you know, as there is an increased complexity and as blended finance structure have been able to catalyze substantial private capital, are current DFIs instruments adequate to support this trend? How can be improved?
So many thanks, Luca, for this question. But before I address this question, I would like to refer to the previous discussion and simply make a bold statement. The impact investors could use the DFIs and treat the DFIs as an asset class by their own, because we have the track record because we are impact investors, we know how to manage risk, and we also have demonstrated that we are able to realize a decent rate of return of investment in the most difficult places of the world. This is why this is an offer that we as DFIs could also provide to impact investors looking for sustainable and responsible investments in developing countries. So answering your question, I do not believe that the international development context is more complex than the past. Yes, we have seen much more actors involved, which makes it necessary to come to a more meaningful cooperation. So we as EDFI, we have a track record of working together amongst us since 1992. So, and we are using also the Team Europe approach as a platform to intensify the collaboration with our colleagues in EBRD, where we have recently signed a framework agreement. We have a long-term relationship with our colleagues at EIB, at IFC, and others, so combining forces. And we at EDFI itself, our strength is a diversity. We have 50 members, and one of our esteemed members is Cofidis, with different kind of mandates, different kind of specialization, which we can use through cooperation. So, for example, our colleagues in FinFund, they as a specialist for sustainable investments in forestry. And by that, they are not yet net zero, they are negative zero with regard to greenhouse emissions. And we can rely on this kind of capabilities. But what we also see is to do more work in fragile countries and in more riskier sectors. There we need also what Jose Luis also has referred to do. We have to collaborate much more with multilateral development banks because we have to address policy issues. How to make the business environment attractive and acceptable for private investors. And for example, we at EDFI, we have joined forces with a large club of large asset managers. And together with them, very recently, we have published guidelines for policymakers on how to unlock private climate finance by simply addressing policy issues. And the second is that we need much more technical assistance and advisory services in order to enable our clients to have a solid business model and to comply with systems in place that allows them to comply with our regulations in terms of impact, in terms of environment, etc., etc. And you mentioned blended finance. Yes, in this context, blended finance could play a crucial role in enabling investments in more risky parts of the world. To help ensure that the blended finance is being used effectively and efficient, and to avoid market distortions or even crowding out private capital, we need to be very careful in addressing the blended finance in a way that it is providing additionality, it's crowding in, that there's a minimum of concessionality, there is commercial sustainability, that's reinforcing markets and promoting high standards. And we at EDFI, we're extremely proud that we have developed these core principles and that the multilateral development banks in 2019 have adopted these principles. And this gives us now a joint basis to go forward and using blended finance in the best way to do much more work in the most risky parts of the world and bridge to impact investments.
Thank you, Bruno. There is no doubt that transparency, I think, it has to be the key principle in the use of blended finance, so that we can use the very scarce catalytic capital at best and not crowding out. And also one comment on what you mentioned at the beginning, I think there is no doubt that there is a lot of scope for collaboration between the private managers and EDFIs. I mean, we have been, you've been doing this for, as I said at the beginning, for decades. And impact fund manager, we recently arrived. I think the advantage of private investors is that I think we can add to your expertise and help catalyze and bring in the large institutional investors and bring in the trillions. So I think we should work together to bring in the trillions. This is my modest perspective on that. Jose Luis, a question for you. What has been COFIDE's experience in catalyzing private investments to multiply available resources, to get to the trillions, basically?
Yeah, well, first of all, I would like to endorse what Bruno was saying. I would say that fees as such are, all of us as individual organizations, but also as an association, we are an asset class in ourselves. So I think some of, for instance, we are among the different institutions, we have a certain specialization in Latin America, others have a specialization in financial intermediation, others in forestry. So some of them are experts in several things. So I will say that ed fees are a very important asset class and that we should be able to cooperate. Well, we certainly feel very proud of the work that we have done precisely with your team, with Uruma. We have been able, I will say, to put together different sensibilities and different restrictions, and we have been able to, with cooperation, a great job of cooperation with the different actors, of getting a project in which we have put together monies from the European Commission, from the Spanish Cooperation, from ourselves, for technical assistance and money with you as managers. That is essential, as I said before. The main restriction that we have to develop impact investing is at the end that we don't have too many operators, too many managers, and you are a team of people with a lot of experience in financial intermediation. We have been able to do this project for promoting agriculture in developing countries, both in Africa and Latin America, in which I will say that we have multiplied by 3 times the crowding in that Bruno was able to talk, the public money with private money. We have been able to put together monies from the Spanish Cooperation, from Caixa, from the investors in Caixa, also monies from Allianz, the insurance company. So ourselves, COFIDES, have put money. Of course, the Spanish Agency for Cooperation has put through FONPRODE money. So at the end, we will have 120 million euros for improving financial intermediation and developing the agriculture sector in developing countries. I think that is a very outstanding project. The future. Of course, we would like to do more things along these lines. We would like to be able to replicate more or less the same model, probably taking other issues. I think the issue of energy, sustainable energy, should be an area in which we should be able to do more or less crowding in the same monies. And also we have been working, I will say that something that relate with, you said at the beginning. Well, we are in a more complicated period than we were before. All the periods have been very complicated. But the only thing that we know is today development is again an issue that is more important than before. We have the European Union that at the end got involved seriously, although with a big concentration in Africa. It's understandable. There is also, well, Latin America has not been hurted for that. So I think that we have a lot of exposure and a lot of abilities to do things. And we would like to also to put in value the ability that we are having with the European Commission to structure very interesting projects, in which we put together private monies with public monies, with technical assistance. And I will name, besides the project with Uruma, the project that we have on renewable energy access in peripheral and rural areas of Africa. We made a pilot project. We would like to enlarge this project. So actually we are trying to work together with the different institutions, and eventually we will share our ideas with the rest of the EDFIs, because in this spirit of cooperation among the different EDFIs, once we have the concept paper of what we would like to do, we would like to enlarge the project so that the project is not anymore a pilot project, but is a project that is going to last for the 6-7 years in the future. So I think there is a lot of room of cooperation, but again, we have to build ecosystem.
Thank you very much, José Luis. Fernando, along those lines, how do you think instruments of the Spanish cooperation should improve? I mean, are the instruments available to FONPRODE, currently to FONPRODE, adequate? Maria mentioned in her presentation that at the moment, for example, the FONPRODE is not able to make local currency loans, which local currency investment, because it's beyond its scope. You know, can you elaborate? I think, and I guess that will be hopefully included in the next cooperation law. This will be very helpful.
Sure. Well, first of all, I wanted to mention that it's a very comprehensive study that Maria presented. But I think at some point I would like to kind of describe where are we now in terms of IFID, because Cofidis is a crucially important service provider, financial analyst and advisor to us. And as José Luis said, we work very well together and we go in the same direction. But Cofidis has its own balance sheet and its own mandate, apart from all the services that we get from them. FONPRODE, just to a few numbers. No, we as FONPRODE now has basically a budgetary allocation of 375 million euros per year. So, in other words, the national budget allows IFID, as a manager of FONPRODE, to commit loans for up to 375 million euros and to actually disburse 200 million per year. As of now, we have an active portfolio of 541 million euros in 58 operations, out of which 157, for instance, are in financial inclusion through 38 MFIs, microfinance institutions. Every single year, 145,000 beneficiaries, 63% of which are women, get microcredit thanks to our second-tier financing. We also have now 95 million euros in 8 investment funds that have invested in 79 business. And of course, it's not a big sum, but we are. I will try to elaborate a little more on the instruments and its constraints. And we have, as an agency, of course, we have on top of that our technical assistance programs. Plus, we are in the process of executing more than 500 million euros in delegated cooperation. So what we want is a Spanish cooperation to become more European, and hopefully the European cooperation to become a little more Spanish. Because last year, the Spanish taxpayer was the third contributor to financial cooperation in Europe, for a total of 1.1 billion euros, which is not pocket money, okay? So what instruments do we need? We need, first of all, we need to be able to change the narrative about financial cooperation, because there is a part of public opinion that keeps also wondering whether we should lend or not to vulnerable countries. And they keep forgetting that no country has developed without external financial aid, that it's impossible to meet the objectives of the 2030 agenda without financial cooperation. So financial cooperation is here to stay. Countries want not only money, they want also the expertise of the private sector. In terms of instruments, the new law need to incorporate guarantees to be able to also have emission of bonds, subscription of new instruments such as, for instance, social impact bonds that are very interesting, a decisive participation in special purpose vehicles for a public-private partnership, a better participation and representation in our investment funds because we have some restrictions there, the ability to do policy-based loans and budgetary support, and to be able to participate in big multi-agency initiatives like the Team Europe initiatives. It also requires a drastic reduction in terms of processes and procedures and more autonomy and financial means to capture and retain specialized talent, and also a more agile policy of partnerships with the private sector. Last but not least, we should move from ODA to TOTS. I think you yourself, Luca, suffered in your operation, and Cofidis was very creative there. How could we avoid the restrictions that our investment might not be considered ODA? So we need to move from ODA to TOTS. The last word on blended finance, because I think you suggested it. Blending TA resources with financial aid is critical. I think financial aid by itself is not the panacea. I couldn't agree more with Bruno that enabling environment and market-friendly policy issues are critical. Also, strengthening the institutional capacity of public agencies and government to work with local and international private sector. And it's also critical. So we are very active, and together with Cofidis, we jointly present a lot of initiatives to the external investment plans, such as this renewable energy program that Jose Luis just mentioned. So by law, we, as FONPRODE, can grant non-reimbursable resources and financial aid. But for fiscal consolidation reasons, the Minister of Finance for the last 6 years told us that we could only do loans without an impact on our public deficit. This year is the first year where we were authorized to use 7 million euros in technical assistance. At the end of the day, whether the monies come from the Commission, from Spanish trust funds, from the agency activity, or from FONPRODE, technical assistance is critical, and I hope I'll have an opportunity to elaborate a little more on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being so clear. I think we touched lots of interesting points. I have personally, which I mentioned it before, an interest in really developing the ecosystem, and I think a key component of building the ecosystem is really to attract talent to Spain, really. So like really offering the right kind of incentives, offering the right kind of attractiveness to really come back to Spain, or building a career in international development. How can we do that? What do you think? Is there any specific reform package? Sometimes, I mean, this would be interesting. We have only a couple of minutes left, but would be interesting to hear at an international level how that is done, and also at a Spanish level what we should be doing to attract talent and support building the ecosystem. Yes, please.
Who you are asking?
Whoever wants to answer. Attracting talent.
Okay. Well, I think 2 minutes. I think it's important that I mean, I worked 17 years for the IDB promoting really venture capital, and I think I see the Spanish cooperation, our official agency, as builder and participant, both on impact investment. I think it's important really to recover this possibility of influence in both as a market maker on both sides, on the supply side and on the demand side, and also to strengthen the intermediaries and the financial institutions and the public institutions to help create really an enabling environment. Now, the first lessons I had for 17 years in Washington was that managers are the key element and talent is the key element. I think our first harvest of investment funds did not work because basically there were funds located in the United States or Canada or other jurisdictions, but more importantly, the management was there. So I think it's very important for me to engage, for instance, with the local private sector, look for, as you said, characterize Jose Luis as patient capitalism, to promote business angel investors that are willing, not only, because again, you cannot have successful companies in failed countries. And I think more and more CSR and the most brilliant minds of the private sector are increasingly aware of this, that you have to build supply chains, that you have to promote entrepreneurship in your own country. So I think that those are the two key elements. I think promoting entrepreneurship together with a regulatory environment, and looking for partnerships with the private sector where people are willing really to put their money where their mouth is, and to really invest in this 2 first years, that the valley of death of all these very promising gazelles or SMEs. So I think creating these networks of managers and venture capitalists is essential. Thank you.
I agree. Any Bruno?
Luca, in order to answer your question, I think we as DFIs, as I look to our members, we do not have a problem yet in attracting the right talent, because we are value-driven institutions that provide a very challenging but also rewarding work. And this is why a lot of people are looking for working with us. But at the same time, also these talents asking for a compensation package which is in line with the many challenges they are facing, also traveling throughout the world, etc., etc., and client-oriented, etc., etc. And And this is why, at the end, we have seen that a lot of talents that we have recruited, our members have trained, that they left again into the industry. So they are working now with the impact investors. They are working with other private sector institutes, with asset managers, etc. And so by doing that, we are creating over time a network of talents throughout the industry. And the final remark I would like to make is also that we as EDFI on the association level, we have created many years ago an EDFI Academy, which helps also to train the people across all the different kind of member institutions. And this is extremely helpful. And within the industry, we'll see that people are moving between multilateral development banks, our colleagues in Washington from IFC, the Inter-American Development Bank, back and forth, and that's great. And this is why I do not believe that at the end we have difficulties to attract as a standard as within the industry. Maybe that some of the members have difficulties to provide a sufficient compensation package that is needed.
Excellent. We're running out of time. Jose Luis, if you have any thoughts you might have, we're really wrapping up. Everybody's looking at me.
No, I could join the comments that have been done. And if I talk, I will talk about the miseries that we have in Spain and our inability to hire new people. But this is also because of the restrictions that Fernando were talking before about this. Ministers of Finance during the last 6 years, in which they consider that any public employee is not a positive contribution. But anyway, I prefer not to cry and to say, okay, well, let's hope that we change and we have. But what I will say is that I would like to say to Bruno that the EDFI Academy is an excellent initiative that makes also very important work for people sharing a common culture, for sharing common ideas about the things that we do together. And we probably will have to improve our ability to make secondments from one organization in another and so on and so forth. But also sometimes it's difficult, even in our country it's very difficult, because at the end, the salaries that we pay are not competitive to have either other people living in another country or other people from another country coming to Spain. So, well, but these are our own miseries. So let's not to share miseries at this moment.
I would say there is a lot of. I would spin
I
it in a.
congratulate you, all of you.
I was spinning in a positive way, say that there is a lot of work to do. And by the way, your team, Jose Luis, I had the chance to interact a lot with them. They're fantastic. So you really have talent in your team. Anyway, I do thank you very much for your time. It was a very fascinating discussion. There is a lot of work to be done, and thank you again. Thank you. I pass the floor to Jose Luis.